Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Subchak-Bankert, and I'm here with three creatures of my own making. First, he needs to forgive himself into existence. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Some of what I will tell you is fact. Some is not, but it is all true. I'm doing great, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing great. Still wondering what that means in the context of this movie.
But that's why it's the perfect quote.
Yes. And in Seeking Life, he created death. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
Victor! I'm good. How are you, Jen?
Let it be known, listeners, anytime there's an opportunity for Greg to repeat a word or a sound over and over again, he will take it. And last but not least...
Oh, no.
Oh,
sorry.
there we go. Yeah. There were no cars. There were no more motorized vehicles in this movie. Sorry, Greg. And last but not least, he's wondering if you'd like to see his bug collection. It's Antonio Elefano. How's it going, Antonio?
The miracle is not that I can speak. It is that you would ever listen. I'm doing great, Jen.
Really? All right, dear listeners, those were all references to the film we are here to review today, Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of Frankenstein, now streaming on Netflix. The Gothic tale stars Oscar Isaac as Dr. Victor Frankenstein, Jacob Elordi as the creature, and Mia Goth as Lady Elizabeth Harlander. If you are listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film, and then with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. PT, if listeners think we're worthy of chasing into the Arctic after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If you don't think we're the monsters, then please follow The Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. But you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. You can also follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. And we are also on Letterboxd. The account is at LTRpod, or you can search for the hashtag LTRpod to see what each of us individually has been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. So first, as always, we're going to start with the short take. What did everybody think about Frankenstein? Who saw this first? Did anyone see this early?
Well, I saw it first, I think. So I've never seen a Frankenstein movie before. I've realized today I'd never seen a Frankenstein movie before. I know. I'd never read the book either. So,
and he's been Antonio. Everybody, good night. See you later.
Frankenstein always seemed like one of the sort of sillier literary monsters as synthesized through pop culture, because that's the only way that I had gotten him. But I do think that Guillermo del Toro sort of like reclaims him, claims him here. I think that he succeeds brilliantly in making us empathize with the creature. But for me, made him so sympathetic that I actually no longer viewed him as like a monster at all. So what's interesting to me was sort of what's left in a monster movie without a monster. I mean, arguably without a monster, we'll talk. But to me, it became this sort of like sobering tale of like abuse effectively rendered, but not quite exactly what I'd signed on for, even though I enjoyed it very much. Greg, what did you think?
I did see it second, so thanks for cueing me in order. And I worked very hard to make sure I could see this on the big screen, which I know Antonio did as well. I believe you two other commentators saw it at home. I appreciate your shameful head shakes that the listeners can't see. But I worked very hard. I wanted to make sure I got out while this was on the big screen. Thankfully, one of my local theaters is playing basically all Netflix releases on film for like a week. I don't know how they got this deal, but I'm gonna just keep going. So I saw this on the big screen. I actually went on a like Thursday afternoon, but in between work things, and I kind of never remember how much I like Guillermo del Toro's movies. It's like I remember very much going to Nightmare Alley and being like, oh right, like he makes really good movies. I forgot in between. And I do think that is partially like, it's very easy to be cynical about Shape of Water, which I think we already Oscar flashbacked at one point. And it's also, you can be cynical and kind of forget about the wonder of any of his films pretty easily. So I sat down and I was like, when it starts unfurling in front of my eyes or unspooling, I'm like, oh yeah, I really like Guillermo del Toro movies, and got freshly excited again. So I'm not going to sit here tonight and defend all the script choices. I do think this overstays its welcome a little bit here and there. It just feels a little shaggy, which I would say is probably out of love for the source material. But the actual world it creates, the production design, the costumes, the actors become secondary. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking a little Wes Anderson-y, but like all of that is like, let's just put on a show and let's do something sumptuous and incredible. And I loved every frame of being in that world and seeing how well all of it was done. I will also say I really liked the structure of it, which I think is a controversial take in the larger critical discourse on this film, but it worked for me. And I would definitely go see it again. And yet I somehow haven't, even though it's playing in my living room anytime I want it to. PT, you saw it third.
Correct. I was just going to say I didn't see it last, which I think that's how I was going to phrase it. But yes, I did. And I considered, but ultimately did not send as the review to the group. Just the, and Antonio is to House of Dynamite as I am to Frankenstein, which is like every critique that's out there of this movie makes total sense. And I'm just like, yeah, you're welcome to not like it. The people who don't like it. But I'm interested. I was on board. I was just like, yeah, do it. Let's go. So yeah, but unlike Antonio, I have seen other Frankenstein movies, and I'm going to do my best to not talk too much about all the other Frankenstein movies, especially the ones I rewatched in the last week or so around this coming out. And so this is interesting in the context of those adaptations, in addition to the book, which I did not reread, but I did read very thoroughly the Wikipedia summary of what happens in it, to try to see, okay, well, what's different and what's changed, and what has been changed in other movies, et cetera, et cetera. And there's issues with the movie for sure, and we will get into that. And there's stuff that both Greg and Antonio were sort of alluding to as, I think, core problems, and just some interesting choices for this being Guillermo del Toro's career-long dream passion project, and how it has turned out compared to what he has been saying about what he wanted. But as a final product on its own, I had a very good time with this after the sort of ups and downs of what the backlash and the backlash and the positives and negatives that were out there from the festival seasons. I was very glad that I got to watch it and enjoy it and feel generally positive about it, even though I think most of what we're going to be talking about is pulling apart some of its flaws. Jen, what do you think about Frankenstein? You did see it last, correct?
I did. So I saw it. I finished it last night. I watched it in, it's shameful that I couldn't go to the theater. I would have loved to have seen this on a big screen. It actually wasn't playing near me, which made it difficult. And so I watched it at home. And not only that, but I watched it across 2 nights. I broke it up into 2 sittings. But actually, I'll get to this in recommendation algorithm, but like that actually I think was the right move, considering some of the criticisms about the pacing of the movie. I think that actually alleviated it. Guillermo del Toro has actually used the word episode to describe sections of this movie. So I'm looking forward to talking about the structure and sort of what we make of it and what works about it and what doesn't. But in general, this was in my hype draft. Guillermo del Toro is one of my guys. Like, he's one of my favorite directors of all time. Unlike Greg, I've never forgotten that he makes great movies. And so there were in some ways where even if this was not good at all, I was still going to enjoy it, because what I love most about Guillermo del Toro probably is his appreciation for the 19th century Gothic. But that's both from an aesthetic level and a storytelling level. And to me, this movie, despite some of its flaws, mostly the pacing, in my opinion, it feels like someone who has spent a very long time reading a lot of Victorian literature. And so he's like one of the real ones. And I was like, I see you. I see what you're doing. And Jacob Elordi in this is absolutely astounding. Like, could not look away when he was on screen. I think he does an amazing job. The crafts in this are impeccable. So
Wait,
there's just
Jen, you're thinking of Saltburn. We were talking about
a movie I did not
Frankenstein.
like. No, I was looking away frequently when I was watching Saltburn. This I could not. So yeah, I think there's a lot to love here. I think it is. I felt the struggle of someone who loves something so much. And I think a lot of the problems probably stem either from that or from Netflix being involved, but I'm not sure about that second one. But yeah, I'm looking forward to unpacking it. I think the story definitely is like, okay, so the people's takes, sorry, and this will be my last thing. People's takes where they're like, what is this movie? Like, where is this coming from? This is such a weird choice. It's not scary. Have you not watched any other Guillermo del Toro movies? Because there's a clear through line to me in terms of the themes and it's like how it portrays, especially the creature, not the monster. So I'll stop there because I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about in a little bit. Recommendation algorithm, in which we establish the audience of a film. So I actually kind of jumped the gun on this a second ago, saying like, if people like Guillermo del Toro, I think they're going to like this. What do you all think about that?
I agree. I think that's right. I think there is the possibility of someone who's a big Guillermo fan and is sort of like not let down, but it's kind of just like, oh, we've gotten this Frankenstein story before in ways they may have enjoyed more. I think that it's interesting the ways in which he's tying himself, or not tying himself, restraining himself perhaps to the story, but also the ways in which he's changing things and changing very important thematic elements of the story. So I could see potentially that being frustrating, but like that's only if you're really deep in the weeds about the book and also the themes of the filmography. I think if you were like, I think when Guillermo del Toro films stuff, it looks cool, you will like this movie because he filmed stuff and it looks cool, even though there are some technical elements that people are critiquing. And I think that's fair. It looks cool in a Guillermo del Toro way. So I don't know why they wouldn't have already seen it if they liked him.
I think one thing though, with like, I don't know how you would characterize The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth. I consider those like fables. Is that does that seem right?
That sounds fair.
Um, and Frankenstein has always been horror, right? Like that's I associate it with that genre. So I think that a lot of this comes down to the expectation of genre. So while you know while fable and horror are kind of related, and there are elements of the aesthetic that were really exciting about the prospect of matching these together, I think that that at the end of the day, I was still expecting Frankenstein to lean more into horror. Um, and this is like Merchant Ivory Frankenstein. It's like an art film before it's a monster film. A mostly faithful literary adaptation, though with change. I'm fine with changes actually. Like I think it's a director's prerogative, and like we've had plenty of adaptations of none that I've seen, but but we've had plenty. So having one for 2025, I think that's fine, and we can talk about those choices. But I think it was just this sort of weird thing where I was like admiring, and like a lot of the qualities of the movie were qualities that I like about art films, but I think I was primed for a particular experience when I came in. And I think this goes to sort of like Jen's question, just Jen's questions from the outline about sort of like, how do we manage people's expectations about this film? How do we describe it? And I think that's probably what I would say. More art film than think more art film and more literary than horror, and maybe the pacing won't be as sort of startling. Greg, what do you think?
So a whole because see, I kind of forget I like Guillermo del Toro, so I've never seen Crimson Peak, which I'll let somebody fill in. I think that might be like hard for me to give any qualifying thoughts about like how it fits into his canon without having seen that one, just because it is more horror and more costume drama as I think. But I think I approach this also very much through the literary. I'm not an expert on this time period. One of my best friends in grad school named Jen was, so I'd like read chapters or pieces of her
Why'd you
dissertation
out
at
me,
times,
Greg?
so that I some whatever I know is actually filtered through Jen's point of view, for better or worse, probably for better. But I will say, when I think of Victorian literature and I think of the period, the whole idea is that there's this sumptuous costume level of it all, that the dresses are big and fancy, the houses are big and fancy, but also this like dark scientific draw about like, let's classify everything, let's understand the world, let's plumb the mysteries of the world. And so for me, this film delivers exactly that. Like, I love Mia Goth dressed in something ridiculous, and the camera pans to like a body torn apart to little bits as a part of the scene. So wait, yeah. Oh, I see what you did there. As long as I didn't mess up her name, that's what I was afraid of. I was
No,
like,
sorry, that was
my
confusing.
queen Mia Goth is fine.
We need to explain that now in the chat.
Oh, okay. Jen called her Mia Moth, and I was very scared that I had called her Mia Goth. So, or anyway, you get it. So I thought this hit the tone really, really well, and I do think that's a tone related to some Guillermo del Toro. Like, Guillermo has always done the like really nice period piece, and then there's something startlingly violent, and that just like awakens you and reminds you that the past is not some fantasy; it's very real. And then there's the monstrous that often represents that. So I thought it worked really well, and I'm more in the Antonio camp. I think I have seen pieces of Frankenstein films, but I don't ever
Makes
recall
sense.
sitting down and watching one. But as Antonio also said, like, you just know the cliches. Like, you're like, oh, here comes the thing, and then the other thing, and then he's gonna get lightning, and yay. But yet I found the presentation of it really enthralling here, even, and perhaps because I hadn't seen so many adaptations. So I think in my ramblings, we're still in the recommendation algorithm. So I would just say, if that kind of tone appeals to you, that's that kind of dark side of science and mystery, I thought this played into that very well. I think if you go in expecting Universal Horror Pictures Frankenstein, you're not getting that kind of monster movie. And I would say that's to the film's benefit.
Yeah, I would say, this is not a horror movie. And that's partially an expectations problem, in that it's only kind of a horror book. Like, it's more this sort of existential crisis concept of like, what does it mean to be alive, and what does it mean to have power, and what are the things that people can try to do and what maybe they shouldn't try to do. So that's, I think it's one of those things. I would assume that I'm not alone. Maybe I am on this call and on the show with the four of us, but hopefully there's some listeners who had a similar experience at some point in their youth of being like, I'm going to read the book Frankenstein because I like the movie, or I like the Halloween costumes that are around. So let me go read the book. And then you read it and you're like, this isn't very scary. It's more just like ruminating about stuff, and that carries forward into this movie. And I think that's, in that sense, this is a successful adaptation, as Greg is saying. But I think, in thinking about the recommendation algorithm, it is more of thinking about things than it is about spooking you and making you're going to be uncomfortable because of maybe some big questions about life and what that means, more than you. And if you ever had a problem with your dad, maybe like that will come through in this movie, because that's a thing that comes up a couple times. But it's not really going to scare you in terms of like something's jumping out of the shadows. I rewatched the trailer, and they definitely like pretend there are jump scares, and I was like, that was not a jump scare in the movie. What are you talking about? It was interesting trailer editing. But I do think, to Greg's point, Crimson Peak is the movie I would say is vibe wise the most similar. And I also recall when Crimson Peak came out, people were like, this is not scary enough for a haunted house movie, because it was more of a gothic romance that was in a spooky place than a spooky movie that had romantic like sub stories to it. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad enough people are really liking it, because I actually, now that I've seen it, I would have thought that after the first weekend, people would have been like, what is this? I'm mad that this didn't scare me at night. So maybe it's a good thing it didn't come out a month ago when I assumed it should have come out, which was leading up to Halloween, that maybe waiting until the week after was smart to like subconsciously pivot people's expectations. Jen, what do you think? Who should watch this movie besides you? Over and over.
It's basically made for me. I really wanted to rewatch it today, but I had too much other work to do. Anyone who likes mad science, like, it's not even mad scientists. It's like, because the first half of this movie has so much going on visually in terms of the cadavers and dissection and all of the sort of like creepy fascination with the human body and with death that the 19th century had. So if you are into anything with mad scientists in it, I think there's enough here for you that you would really like it. Also, like Greg mentioned Crimson Peak. I really like Crimson Peak. It also has like the twisted family secrets kind of thing that I feel like there's a little bit of that going on in here too. The dark family history that's now coming to roost. But for me, I was still scared by Crimson Peak, but knowing full well that was not normal. And so usually Guillermo del Toro is my, if he does anything horror leaning, it's my speed, my flavor of horror. But the next biggest comp from his filmography, I think, would be The Shape of Water. If you'd like to hear my soliloquy defending why it's okay that movie won Best Picture in the year that it did, you can go listen to our Oscar Fairy Flashback episode from that year. But the idea of finding the beauty and the humanity in something that other people would call monstrous, that is a really prominent theme in this adaptation of Frankenstein. So I would say if you like Shape of Water, then I think you're probably going to like this. It's a good litmus test.
To add one more recommendation bit here, but in a snarky way, if you liked Wicked, but only for the windows, this movie's right there. It's right there for you.
Jen, I really enjoy watching Sonic the Hedgehog with Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. So you're saying I should see this movie? I just wanted to find another mad scientist movie, and that's literally all I could come up with.
I recently rewatched Back to the Future, so you're saying this is basically the same movie.
I mean, he does have similar number of like costume changes and bathrobe wearing in the Dr. Robotnik, right? Yes, I've seen those movies, Greg. Okay. Anyway, I think we're ready for spoiler mode. If you have not seen Frankenstein, you don't want it spoiled. It's right on Netflix waiting there for you, all 2.5 hours, right? Is at the runtime?
I just want to note, even Antonio, who's the coolest on this because he hates joy and good times, is still positive on it. So I think this is a sound recommend. And if you were scared off by that initial what is this reaction from the film festival audiences, don't let that fool you. It's worth a watch, and it's better than the vast majority of things on Netflix, for sure.
I strongly co-sign that, while cautioning, I don't know if joy and good times is a way of pitching what happens in this movie.
That's true.
Well, we
That's
think
fair.
differently about things that I'll mention in a minute after
Yeah,
spoilers.
also, like,
but
you were all downplaying everything. It is extremely gruesome and violent in certain parts. Like let's manage those expectations too. Like I looked away and was like, definitely more than once.
And the one other reaction out of film festivals was like, Guillermo del Toro claims he loves practical effects, but there's CG in this. It's great. There is so much practical effects. And yes, there's a little CG here and there. There are a few aspects that look kind of blue screeny, volumey, but like the vast majority of this movie looks gorgeous to me. And so, like, you know, if you need a CG effect to get a creature to do a certain thing, maybe some wolves look a little dicey. Might be the one I complain about the most.
Wolves are fine.
Are you talking the crypto wolves? Is that what you're talking about, Greg?
We do not speak that demon's name on this podcast. That is a monster too far, sir. Like, how dare you? But yes, I think that, to me, I will just speak for myself. That criticism was way overblown. Like, just because you like practical effects doesn't mean you're not allowed to use the CG toolkit either. So
yeah, I wanted to be like, I love you, Sean and Amanda, but you gotta chill out. Like, you just gotta. I will say that, like, my theory is that because the practical stuff looks so amazing, there was just a more of a contrast the couple times they did use CG. And I think if the CG were placed in any other movie, no one would be talking about it. You know what I mean? I think that it's just the contrast that's noticeable.
It's
but anyway.
that I also think there's, I don't want to just blame Netflix, but I do think there's a color grading digital camera usage approach that is not exclusive to Netflix. But I do think, I was joking about the windows earlier, but I do think it has the same problem as Wicked, where it's like, look at all this stuff they made, and it kind of looks bland a bunch of the time. And that, I think that adds to the CG element in a way that I don't think people are identifying it as like what they don't like is that sort of muted gray, which is partially a choice about how things are dressed in the movie, but also just kind of looks like generic Netflix slop sometimes, done really well, done with amazing costumes and sets. But it almost feels like there's a filter put on it. And I am somewhat curious. I want to go. I'm hoping to still be able to go see this in the theater, having watched it at home, to see if it feels different in the theater, because it did sometimes feel like this could just be a generic 8-episode Netflix show visually, but like by Guillermo del Toro with cool stuff. And I think that's triggering some of the people's like, it doesn't look good, and the CGI is terrible. When I don't know what they expected. I don't know how many towers. How many stories of a tower did they want Guillermo del Toro to build in real life? Did
you know he purchased personally a bunch of the props because Netflix was like, we don't have the budget for that, and he was like, fine, I'll just buy it and then keep it in my house after.
Did you see the interview where he's trying to buy a place in England, but he's told the real estate agent it has to be, real estate people have to guarantee it's haunted, and he has to stay there for a night and be haunted, or else he won't buy it.
And
that's where he's going to put all the Frankenstein stuff and all of he has a huge Frankenstein collection besides this movie. He's a madman. I love him.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's talk about spoilers.
Yeah, we were trying to go to spoiler mode. So yeah,
sorry.
Again, here's our last warning. Okay, so PT has pointed out that typically we start with the most spoilerly spoiler when we break from the music, and he wants to talk about the ending, and I think that's a good call.
Yeah, I do. And so the which maybe for our friends who have not seen many Frankensteins or read Frankenstein, this will be a little bit like, who cares? But at least Jen and I, we can touch on this. I think one of the biggest changes in this movie, or at least the culmination of the biggest change, is that the creature innocent, like throughout the whole thing, creature does very little wrong. And the end of the movie is a story of forgiveness and not a story of just sort of being trapped in a world you never wanted to live in because your creator does not actually care about you, which is sort of how the book Frankenstein ends, that like, I never asked God to be alive, but now I'm stuck in this world. And that's sort of the vibe of poor Mary Shelley trapped with these dudes doing laudanum in a Swiss castle, doing a scary story contest. And this is what she came up with. So what did we think about that? Like, there's no other prominent adaptation that has done this. Again, the book does not do it this way. The fact that it ends on it being the creature coming to say, I'm here to forgive you. And Victor, in his dying breaths, being like, great, thank you. That's the sort of what we're moving towards, and that the liberation that comes from that for the creature. I don't know. What did you think about that as the ending? Jen, I'm going to ask you because you have more back knowledge on all this.
I thought
you birthed monsters. No, sorry. Go ahead. Wow. I don't mean that about your actual children. That came out too mean.
Well, I mean, I really liked it. I was scratching my head a little bit because I didn't realize that's where we were going, which maybe was on me on my couch at home late at night. But I thought it was really beautiful, and I think the problem with the book has always been that I think people struggle with because they don't want to change too much about it, is that yes, Victor Frankenstein is a total egomaniac and a megalomaniac and all the maniacs, but at the same time he's still the protagonist mostly. You know what I mean? Like, it's like like because he's the human male. Like it's and so there's a certain amount of centricity that he has to have in the narrative. And I think that for me, what Guillermo del Toro is really trying to work against is the idea that the monster is just the monster and is not actually human, and that there but and I think it's being what he's trying to do is largely being misunderstood, because I listened to the DGA interview. Bradley Cooper interviewed him for the DGA podcast. It's a great listen. Love hearing Guillermo del Toro talk about basically anything. But he made a very big point to say that his goal was to show that Victor Frankenstein isn't just a villain and the monster isn't just a monster, and that they live in the gray somewhere in between, and that he wanted the viewers to be able to understand each character, hence why the movie's broken up into two tales, like, and each he said it's like a he said story, I think is the way he described it, which I thought was really interesting. But I don't think that's how most people are receiving it, because most critics I've listened to talk about this movie, if they are complaining about it, their main complaint is that Victor has become too one-dimensional, and that he's basically the bad guy, like a mustache twirling bad guy from the get-go, and that the first half of the film does not do enough to make us empathize with him. So what do you all think about that?
Can we throw that question to Antonio? But I want to add the swerve of a lot of critics are complaining about Oscar Isaac specifically, that he's miscast. So challenge Antonio, answer Jen's question, and then throw in your thoughts about Oscar Isaac as Dr. Frankenstein.
Well, okay. Well, I'll start with Oscar Isaac. I don't know that he's miscast. I don't know that he's doing anything particularly poorly in the film. I found his portrayal to be what I sort of expected Victor Frankenstein to be. But to Jen's point about the two parts, right? Because we reviewed fairly recently something that happened in multiple perspectives, and the primary complaint was that, like, what are we gaining from each part, right? So this is my question actually for you all, is that while I enjoyed each part, and while, obviously there are plot elements that are missing, that we get filled in from one part to the next, I I think that to a degree I understand the criticism that I'm not sure how much additional shading or how much additional understanding I'm getting of the dynamic between the two, between part 1 and part 2. Yes, right? Like the perspective shifts in terms of what character is central, but in terms of, like, you know, what the ultimate, like, power dynamic is and who I'm supposed to sympathize with, that didn't shift from part 1 to part 2, right? I mean, it illuminated to a degree, in the movement from part 1 to part 2, the sort of cycle of abuse, because Victor Frankenstein was abused by his father, and then part of his obsession with science was sort of like out bullying his own dad, right? And out sciencing his own dad. But, um, but at no point did I feel for the doctor in the way that I feel for, like, the creature. And to go back to PT's original point about sort of like the ending of the film, I like the ending of the film, and I think that it was actually a necessary move, because to the extent that we want our characters to grow and we want to feel like and after 2.5 hours that there's been a movement in something, right? I think that a monster that never felt like a monster in the first place, that we never bought as a monster, someone that we just purely empathize with, then rather than softening a monster, it seems like it's just like it's providing this additional layer of humanity to the creature, right? And so that's the movement that we get at the end. That is the payoff, I think. So I'm fine with that as a choice, and it makes sense in terms of the narrative and sort of the choices that we have here. What do you all think? Do you what do you all think specifically about the difference between part 1 and part 2, and what we lose or gain, or how much richer the story is for being told in these two perspectives?
Well, I want to note, again, from a thorough reading of the Wikipedia page, but not returning to the actual text, this is how the book is set up. The book is framed from letters from the boat captain who we meet in the beginning, who's like, I had this crazy thing happen, and this is what this guy said. And then the guy being Victor Frankenstein, gives his story. And then once the creature escapes, from which I think it's a little in the book the creature spends less time with Victor in the beginning. Like Victor is immediately like, oh no, and just kind of pieces out. So the creature then like leaves and runs away, and then we switch to the creature's perspective to see what he was up to, and so we're getting the creature's story. So it kind of feels like just inherently baked into the story, because how could Victor tell what happens when the creature's off hiding in the barn listening to the blind man and all that? Like to get that story, we kind of have to go end up at least following both of them, if not one, and we've stayed so close to Victor for that, for most of his story, that I think it makes sense to switch. I guess like because of that, I never felt like, oh, this should be adding more or this should be changing the perspectives in the same way, and maybe this is unfair, but in the same way that covering the same ground in House of Dynamite, the movie Antonio is referring to, I don't think it's too many spoilers to say we're seeing multiple perspectives on the same thing, that I wanted there to be more differences. I wanted there to be more things added in. Whereas in this movie, it just felt more like the story will end inevitably once Victor has blown up the tower and busted up his leg, which to me was the most gruesome part, Jen. But which again, he did by his own hand. So thematically makes sense. But that like, we weren't going to get more of the creature unless we shifted to the creature's perspective. So the additional information of how the doctor was treating him, I guess we got a little bit more of that. But I agree with you. Victor was already a jerk as soon as the creature was born. I mean, and that's part of the Victor story, is him just being like, oh, I wanted to get here, and now that I'm here, now that I've caught the car, I, the dog, have no idea what to do with this. And I don't really, maybe I didn't actually want this in the first place. Maybe I should just get out of here and, try to figure something else out. With this movie having the added thing of like him trying to sort of figure it out, but then also being mad that like his brother's fiance that he's crushing on, maybe he's crushing on the creature. And that's a weird love quadrangle that forms. But yeah, I don't know. It didn't bother me as much that the way it was structured that way, but I do understand the expectation that it's going to change more. Like if we're going to get a different perspective, it will add more. But I will also say, I feel like because people have not responded as well to Oscar Isaac's performance, and they have responded to Jacob Elordi's, that the chatter I've been seeing is people just being super pumped when he's like, oh, you've had your story, what about my story? It's like, boom, part 3, the creature story. Like that, folks are excited for that. I don't know if that's how it played out in your respective theaters, but I don't know. Greg, what are you thinking?
Yeah, there's a lot in the mix of the conversation right now in a productive way that I want to try to synthesize and engage with a little bit. So I had also heard that this largely, met the structure of the book, and I was just thinking right now about so you have this movie, House of Dynamite, and then I was actually thinking of something. Because I just say things are Rashomon-like without ever having seen Rashomon, I will instead go to The Last Duel, which to me is like one of the more recent times where you got 3 perspectives, and that was more extreme. So House of Dynamite, you got more information, but everything existed in the exact same way. You just filled in pieces you didn't have before. Whereas The Last Duel, you saw the same scenes redone to change the emphasis, change the performance in ways that changed the emotion of the scene. And I think those are very specific kinds of experiences that are meant to feel more puzzle boxy. And I think I landed here on this one that I ended up feeling, and I at risk of like parodying my own take on One Battle After Another, I just felt the weight of the generations, right? That like the life of a man is that you live in your father's household and your father's story happens. And I don't mean to gender this. Your parents' story happens, and then your story takes over and you leave home and go out in the world in kind of that classic Campbell sense, and you go have experiences. And I do think I agree with PT's take just now. I had no problems with Oscar Isaac. My favorite Oscar Isaac mode is like cocky douchebag, and like totally fit in. So I think I agree with Antonio saying like I didn't really like, I didn't really feel that bad about his abuse, both by his father and then when Galactus yells at him for a little while. It took me a long time to figure out where I'd last seen Ralph Ineson, but I got there eventually. I was like, yep, it's Galactus yelling at Moon Knight. So yeah, man, there's too much Marvel.
Wow.
But I do think like I didn't sympathize with him, but I really liked Oscar Isaac in that mode. And that to me, in my limited understanding, is what Dr. Frankenstein should be, right? He's a man who thought he could be God. Now, there's two cliches about this movie that, whether you've seen 10 adaptations or not, you hear people try to be smart with all the time, which the first I haven't heard much of in discourse, which is actually the monster is not named Frankenstein. It's named Frankenstein's creature, right? And then the second is like, well, the real monster is Dr. Frankenstein. And like, I was glad this film didn't try to make a meal of that. That was just the simple truth from the beginning. And I felt like we never lost that. The part I struggled with a little bit more, and when I said I thought it was a little shaggy, we spent a long time with like the creature living in the walls or under the shed of a cider house. Like those segments I had a little more time kind of feeling fully engaged with because I think I was so compelled by the relationship question. So I do think all of that sums up to the structural changes did not bother me because I found each piece really compelling. I was not that familiar with the overall frame with the ship captain, and I really liked it. I'm a long established fan of tall ships on this podcast. Master and Commander's coming back to a theater near me soon, and I'm going to go. So that was our old Thanksgiving episode. You guys ragged on me for recommending people watch Master and Commander with their dad, but name me a better Thanksgiving. Go ahead. I'll wait. Name me a better Thanksgiving.
I want to check the transcript. I've never made fun of anyone for recommending Master and Commander. That movie's a masterpiece.
So I do think that I really found the frame narrative so compelling, and that felt to me so much a piece of the Victorian world, right? It feels like the investigation, the idea of the truth, the kind of royal society going through different accounts of things. Like it all just kind of fit with this world that I really, really enjoyed it. And I still accept that Elordi just wiped the floor with everybody else. And in case it doesn't come back to me, I will say, Mia Goth is incredible. She has nothing in this movie. She's given so little to do. That was the one disappointment for me. And if you are somehow here without having seen her trilogy of A24 films, X, Pearl, and Maxine, you would be shocked what an incredible scream queen she is, and like just actress in general. So I was a little disappointed that she was wasted here.
I'm not to make this a thing about like what's different from the book, but I think there's two other things that are that I think are important because they might have affected how people reacted. Again, we've reacted generally positively. We've got maybe some issues, but so one of them is that in this movie the creature until we get to the boat, the creature doesn't hurt anyone or kill anyone. Like, I think he's throwing some people around on the boat by that point. But in the book, he intentionally and to get back at Victor, kills Elizabeth on their wedding night. And also earlier in the story, kills William, who in the book is still a child. Like William's like 5 years old. And he kills William to again be like, you're a jerk. And so that's an interesting shift to, again, creature innocent, where it's like he's not like there's an accident of pushing that kills William in this one, and then it's just straight up Victor pulling the trigger that kills Elizabeth. The other thing that's different is the Christoph Waltz character doesn't exist in the book. There is a professor who is usually the one that becomes the sort of mentor, but it's more Dr. Waldman is usually just kind of like, oh no, you should pursue whatever is your passion. And then Victor's like, got it. Regenerating life. Dr. Waldman's like, what? And then Victor leaves. But in this movie, we had Christoph Waltz as this like funder, like a funder, like a merchant of death, because he's an arms dealer, but he wants a new body because he's got an STI. So I thought that did not work.
Same.
I did not like Christoph Waltz. I mean, I like Christoph Waltz in terms of his performance. He's great in stuff he does, and he's doing some of his stuff here. But that's the part of the movie that I was like, we could just not have that. Like, what if he just like used some of his baronic inheritance from this family to buy a old place that is a big tower, and then scrounge lab equipment, which seems to be what happens in most of the other adaptations. I don't know why we needed Christoph Waltz, and I think taking 15 or 20 minutes out from that story might have made the whole thing cleaner and a little bit more condensed, and not something that you have to watch in episodes over 2 nights. I don't know. What do you all think about that?
Yeah, I think if you cut him out of the movie, not a ton changes. But I do think there's like a very subtle wartime, post-war sort of critique that's in here that would have been very much a part of like Mary Shelley's experience, because I think Frankenstein's published in 1818. Waterloo, I should look this up beforehand, is like right before that. I think
1815.
Okay, so
you're right.
And I feel like the fact that his benefactor is like a warmonger, more or less, and that's where all the bodies are coming from. And there's the whole scene where the creature, when he flees the tower, runs into all the dead bodies from the soldiers, presumably from an old battlefield, and takes the uniform or the coat of one of them, and then the blind guy assumes he's a soldier, or someone that he meets after that is like, "Oh, were you in war?" And that's how. Yeah, I think it is the blind man.
It is
because it's the way he rationalizes his scars, right? And this might be jumping the gun on a question I had later, but the last quote from Byron at the end of the movie is from this like epic poem. It's called Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. And it is basically like a wandering traveler narrative, but through like battlefields and like through war fronts. And so I feel like there's something there in terms of like the obsession or the proliferation of death and Frankenstein's interest in resurrection as tied to like massive amounts of people dying from war. Now, is that like an important part of the movie? No, not necessarily, but it is very much of the historical period, and is one of those literary connections where I was like, wait a minute, why is a Byron getting a quote at the end of this movie? And then I looked it up and was like, So
I just toss in this, I don't have much to say about, but Stephen Metcalf, the critic over at Culture Gabfest for Slate, pointed out that Byron is in the story competition that Shelley creates Frankenstein in, and he was incensed that you would do this anti-feminist move of letting her victory be soiled by giving Byron the last word on Shelley's epic masterpiece. And I was like, that's actually a pretty good point. Speaking as somebody
the
who
optics aren't great.
Yeah, it just doesn't work out terribly well. So my daughter is named Ada after Ada Lovelace, which is Byron's daughter. So we have a lot of Lord Byron stories around, and it's funny how he's always like, all the books are like, Ada's mom loved math and her dad loved poetry. Enough said about him, right? Like they skip the story of him because not fair for children's books. So anyway, but I think that's a little problematic. And, it is funny that this feels like such a male-centric story when it is, originally such a celebrated early work by a woman, meaning in the canon of novels and such.
I have one potential reading that could redeem both the two different perspectives choice and this like potentially anti-feminist swipe at Mary Shelley at the very end, which is not how I interpret it, but it doesn't look good. I agree. So the quote that PT opened with not all of this will be like, some of it will be fact and some will be fiction, but all of it is true. To me, that is sort of implying that Victor's story must have exaggerations or misinformation in it, right? He's telling his own story, but maybe he's not being particularly factual about it. And to me, and then to go with what Greg was saying earlier about Mia Goth being underused, there's one moment in the scene where I think it's the one where she brings him the butterfly and or the moth in the jar, and he's like, "Hey, are you feeling what I'm feeling?" And she says, "Just because you believe something doesn't make it true." And so there is potentially a reading of the first half of this movie where he is basically imagining that she was returning his feelings, and we would never know because it's his version of the story. And then when we get to the creature's version of the story, right, it says, oh, like she's like, part of me that thought it was weird was like they acted like they had been together, the creature and Elizabeth, for like years. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure you only saw each other like 10 minutes in a dungeon, according to the earlier part of this movie. But
Don't
that might
judge
be
everybody's love, Jen. That could be real.
but that might account for it also, right? That Victor just was wildly wrong about what she was feeling because in favor of his own feelings, and like that might be reading too much into it. But that to me was like the one pivot point where I was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is the thing that we gain from the two perspectives.
My only thing for that is that if that were the case, and that Victor's the lens of Victor's perspective is meant to color everything, then I would think that I would view the creature in a lesser way than I do. Like I would empathize with him less in that section. But from the beginning, from the inception, from that throughout Victor's section, he just seems like this soulful like being that that I automatically like sympathize with in a way that Victor clearly doesn't. So that's the only thing. I think that with regard to Elizabeth, like I can see that, but I think of Elizabeth so little in the course of this movie that that I don't know. I have to go back to how I view the creature. I I don't know. Maybe Jacob Elordi is just too good at being empathetic or whatever. Like, you know, that we talked earlier about how like people were complaining that he's too hot to be Frankenstein, but I don't know that it's too hot. It was just that he never seems that, even when he's like tearing stuff apart and throwing people around, because he's throwing like the what do you call them in Star Trek, the red shirt people,
Yeah.
like the boat folks.
Yep.
Because it was just them, I was just like, whatever. Right.
Yeah, I feel like I felt more horror when he's ripping apart the wolves, because they really make a point. He's basically Snow White, because he's got little rat friends that hang out with him and he does not eat them. He totally could have eaten them. They would have been good snacks, right? Like for him. And then he has the moment with the deer in the forest, right? So he basically is like a Disney princess. And so when he like rips apart that wolf, I was just like, oh my gosh, we've crossed a line in a way that, you know, is, but I definitely agree that like from the moment we see him, we feel bad for him and we don't like Victor. Although my one counterpoint to that is like there's like a 15 to 20 minute period where Oscar Isaac is in exasperated parent mode. And I was like, I see you. I see you.
Yeah.
Just
like,
say one other word. Any other word.
And the way he like reacts to the creature picking up the razor and like he's bleeding everywhere and he's just like, oh my God. Like,
oh yeah.
Like this movie really is more than anything about parenthood. And I feel like, again, the structure, because like a lot of people are like, why did we get the whole backstory with his dad, Charles Dance, and who was very good, I thought, as like aloof dad. But it really creates this like symmetry between, you know, this, and it goes back to the cycle of violence. And I think that is what explains the forgiveness moment at the very end, to circle back to our original question, which was how long ago, I don't know. But we see Victor's father treats him so poorly and abuses him, and his reaction to that is when he gets a child, the creature, he abuses him, right? So that's very clear. But then when we get to the creature's tale, the creature manages to evolve past that. As Antonio was saying, he grows and changes for the better because he meets the blind man in the I guess, like, I was gonna say woods, but like they're in a house. But he meets that blind. He meets the blind man who is a surrogate father to him and teaches him, instead of yelling at him for only saying one word, he teaches him to read. And by the end, he's reading Paradise Lost. Like, so clearly Victor was doing something wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where it's theoretically more admirable, or like you can appreciate more intellectually than you can as an actual movie going experience. Because I do agree, the first part of the movie does drag more than the second part. I was actually into the like he's hiding in the shed part, but that might just be me. Like,
I will never turn down the opportunity to shout out a Paradise Lost reference. And I do think that Guillermo is demonstrating that this is that story, right? So Frankenstein has been cast out literally from the Tower of Heaven, where there was good times for some people who lived there, and is now on in the hell on earth. And I think that's really interesting then. And you shouted out Charles Dance, but William Bradley doesn't get this shout out, right? Who plays Filch in the Harry Potter movies.
Oh, yeah.
And he's also somebody in Game
Walder
of
Frey.
Thrones. So I also like that, William Bradley's character is a blind man, so you get like double Milton, right? You get 2 levels of Paradise Lost on top of that. You all don't know this because I only do it on my literary podcast, Through the Glass Columns, where we're reading Wheel of Time, one chapter at a time. I bring up Paradise Lost all the time because it unlocks Western literature, and I do think the invocation here is more deliberate than like. Usually when you bring up Paradise Lost, it's like Adam and Eve. Yep, remember Genesis. But this feels like it has something more nuanced to say, particularly in the kind of, if you haven't read Paradise Lost, the one thing you know is that Satan's the hero, right? And that Satan is ultimately evil, but is so charismatic and wonderful. So maybe Antonio before was saying Elordi is too Satan-like, in that he's not too hot. He's just too Satan-like to be dismissed. I don't know. Cut all this, Jen.
No, I think that's good. Keep it in. Run it twice. I think that what's interesting to me, and again, this is potentially because I'm too beholden to having other experiences with the story of Frankenstein, is that a lot of this stuff is, at least in the original story, and is in some of the adaptations. Paradise Lost is in Shelley. She talks about that the blind man has these books, and the creature. I don't know if he teaches the creature directly, but the creature learns to read through lessons being given to someone else in the house, and then he starts to take the books and read them. But there obviously is something about like who created us. There's a real like questioning of God in this, in addition to the sort of man aspiring to be God. One of the big edits from the 1931 version was after it came out, but then the production code came into effect. They had to cut for 60 years the line, in God's name, I'm God, like Henry Frankenstein in that movie saying like I've become God. Which was not allowed for regular audiences in America. But, that's in there. And so there is something about being like the creature feeling like a fallen angel and feeling like, oh, like shouldn't things have been better than this? Like, why have I been cast out by the creator? And, what choices did I make that led to this happening? But then in like the original version and some of the other versions, eventually a buildup of that feeling is the creature feeling rage and lashing out. And in this movie, it's just him being like, I'm just sad. And like, I'm just sad about it. I'm showing up to tell you that I'm sad and I'm going to leave. And then it's like, well, I guess you're hunting me. And so they kind of have a back and forth, but he's never trying to like get back at Victor. He's always just sort of trying to explain why he's upset, and also trying to get a companion, which is also in the book, but they don't make the companion in the book. And so
he does, and then like aborts. Right?
Yeah, I think that he says
like
he will,
starts to, but then he's like, no, you're gonna reproduce, and
right,
and so I can't let that happen, which becomes like a weird taunt in this version, where
Yes.
he's like, oh, do you think you're gonna have little Frankenstein babies? Nice.
And he says it's Frankenstein's creatures babies.
Yes,
Victor,
exactly.
please. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's interesting. Because it does feel a little sanded over in the edges, which I think maybe is going back to Antonio's point of Guillermo del Toro liking to make fables, that it's more of a fable if it is just sort of Jacob Elordi's creature is kind of an innocent who's just trying to figure things out in the world, and he never becomes like, again, except from the perspective of the people on the ship when he's throwing things around, but he's really just like, give me this guy because I need to forgive him, which is weirdly like the goal, but you don't know that in the beginning.
I mean, I think a lot of this is a product of the parenting angle, right? Because I feel like for Guillermo del Toro, it seems like, okay, there's this mythical story that I've always had my whole life carried around with me, and every movie I've made has sort of been a response to me reading this myth, and it's so fundamental to my style of storytelling that he has taken the more abstract concept of the creator, right, which in Shelley's text is much more loaded from a religious perspective, right? It's like creator can mean God, right? Although Guillermo del Toro has said he's a lapsed Catholic, right? He's Catholic, so like it's not wholly without pun intended, I guess, without thinking about religion and theology. But
sorry, Jen, to interrupt, but I just want to note I've seen multiple interviews with Oscar Isaac where Oscar said he and Guillermo only spoke in Spanish on the set, and that Guillermo kept saying this is the Latino Catholic version of Frankenstein.
Oh, all right. Well, that maybe explains some things. But anyway, so like to me, it seemed like he took this more abstract concept of like Frankenstein as creator, capital C, right, and then said, well, but he's also a father, and so and that's the part of the story I can relate to because I am a son of a father, and I am the father of kid. I don't actually know the gender of his kids, but he and he, and I think that's why it's so tender at the end, because he's thinking about his own children when he's telling the story, and how is he being too hard on them, or what generational trauma is he sort of like continuing and passing on to them, and how does he apologize for that, and then they forgive him for that. Part of this is I'm getting from the DGA podcast, but so I dug up a really old review of, I don't know if anyone remembers, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But I apparently spent a lot of time in my review for that movie talking about Frankenstein, and the quote that I have pulled up there actually, like, yeah, because
who's Bradley Cooper? It's all a circle.
But where's your conspiracy board with all the push pins? So anyway, so like, and I think the quote, which I've had pulled up the whole time we've been talking in case I needed it, I think really speaks to what we're talking about. And so in the novel, Frankenstein says, a new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their belong to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Right. And so there's so much like irony in that statement, because it's clear from this version of the movie that didn't work out the way he wanted to, you know what I mean? And that we assume that when you are a father who creates a child, that child is both a reflection of you, a part of you, but also grateful for you creating them, right? That's Frankenstein's perceived relationship with the creature, at least initially, right? And then to see how that completely goes haywire, because it's not at all what happens when you are a creator, right? You don't control your creation, and I think that's at its core with this movie. Like a lot of the choices, I think, can go back to that central idea.
I just love that after so many bits where I tell Jen to be quiet so I can talk to her about women, she just lectured Antonio and I about being fathers. It was perfect. We got there. Full circle in a different way. Well, and I think just that was really nicely said. And I was thinking too about if that is really a breaking with the adaptation, that's like it's this nice resonance with the fact that he would take his core mythology. The fact that Guillermo del Toro in all his films always identifies with the monstrous makes me want to give him like a big teddy bear hug. He also looks like a great hugger, right? But that I think he is feeling so much in his art, at least it feels like he's portraying himself as the monster, and that the one gift he'd want to give his children is maybe to end that cycle of trauma and to earn their forgiveness in some way, or to be forgiven is pretty dramatic. And I the point I stumbled through on Paradise Lost, just to put a button on that, is that, remember, Satan is not out purely for revenge. Satan is neglected. He's trying to understand, why does God love these people and not me? Why don't I have the Father's love anymore? Both the Son in heaven in the initial war, and then the humans on Earth. So that feels like it's wrapped in that. Like, if we can really just break this cycle, and give love a chance, sure.
Antonio, which of the questions in our outline that we haven't talked about should we talk about?
Oh,
Where do we go next?
well, I want to go to a point that I actually didn't know before reading this outline, which is that Andrew Garfield apparently was originally
Oh,
supposed
yeah.
to be the creature. And so you ask the question, what is he thinking and feeling right now? Because he chose to be a more earthly monster in After the Hunt, presumably. And I guess instead, I don't know if he was doing it at the same
It was
time.
because of the
But,
strike. And
oh, okay.
then, so then I assume it would be After the Hunt, but like filming because of the strike got delayed. And then he had to, instead of starting Frankenstein, the other movie he was working on, presumably After the Hunt, was not finished. And so
I got it.
apparently they cast Jacob Elordi like maybe 6 weeks before they started shooting Frankenstein.
Wow.
It was 9 weeks. There's a little like 45-minute documentary on Netflix that doesn't talk about Andrew Garfield, but does talk about that they had spent like 3 years making the makeup for the creature, and then there was an actor change, and they had 9 weeks to get it ready for a very different body type, and that Guillermo del Toro was clearly very uncomfortable with like how much he had poured over and like created this perfect thing, and then it all had to happen really fast. But he liked the way that it came out. But yeah, it could have been Andrew Garfield. I mean, I am confident Andrew Garfield would have been good, but Jacob Elordi's great. So
Yeah, Andrew Garfield, I associate with just sort of like like a sensitive guy. So so that part of it feels like, now knowing the sort of aesthetic and the point, like I can understand the casting of Andrew Garfield in this role. Jacob Elordi feels more revelatory because I think that the modes that we've generally seen him in have been sort of like cooler, and he seems generally like his appearance seems more menacing. Like both beautiful people, but yeah, I think I think Andrew Garfield would have been fine, but I enjoyed Jacob Elordi. What do you all think? How would Andrew Garfield have fared?
I mean, Jen's question is literally, what is Andrew Garfield thinking right now? And I think it's, dang, that monster would have looked better with a medallion on his chest. But I mean, I actually kind of completely agree with Antonio. And I'm not a Euphoria person. Do you all know Elordi from Euphoria first, or nobody's done?
I've never seen Euphoria.
I haven't either.
Couldn't make it through an
and that's
episode.
like everybody's go-to for him, but I actually found myself thinking a lot about Priscilla, where he is pretty monstrous as Elvis. And Jen's very quickest take on her reaction was like, dang, Elordi's tall, which, like, I was like, yeah, remember? And Kaylee Spaney's tiny. So like those two together, it was so comedically framed. And I think she was on like Apple boxes most scenes, they've said behind the scenes to get there. So but I agree that this film to me doesn't work as well without Elordi. And you can credit him for a million things, but just the physicality that I assume had to be trained into him. I think of when you get the behind the scenes on these Planet of the Apes movies, and everybody's like, we went to monkey camp for like 3 months. We sat and, could only move like monkeys. And it's like, he must have done something extreme like that to prepare himself and to kind of define those movements. And to also just the bravery of like, I'm just going to be in a diaper for like an hour of this movie, and I'll get America to care. So it worked well. He nailed it. And I have not read a single review that didn't, like, even the pans are like, but that Elordi, he's pretty great. So I think this is a big step up for him, and that's exciting because I think he's got good taste and will pick cool projects to use his capital on.
One thing with the physicality, I'll compare it to like Emma Stone in like Poor Things, where she has to sort of like invent what it would be like to like be a grown person learning how to do these things, and I think it was a similar kind of move. Sorry, PT, I interrupted you.
No, I was just gonna say I thought it was an incredible performance, and to tie into what you were saying, I think part of it is needing to exist in the context of, oh, you know how Frankenstein walks, even though they mean Frankenstein's creature. But like they like you have the sort of general idea, even though the sort of classic way that Frankenstein walks doesn't happen until like the fifth movie. But that's a whole other conversation. We don't have to get into that. He becomes blind later, and that's why his arms are out, because he becomes blind. But whatever. That like he has to create like a new version of that is unique and interesting and different. And I think that he really does that. And again, he's set up to succeed because he's a nicer version, or a less there's less lashing out, and so there's no like you don't have to watch him kill one of the characters we have some affection for as an active choice. So that's helpful for him. But I think that even if Guillermo had decided to leave that in, I think that like his sort of soulful eyes and the way that they come through the makeup and through the movement, I think would have continued to leave people with while I'm totally pro creature. So I think maybe Oscar Isaac's bad because I don't even like him, which again I think is intentional and is not Oscar Isaac's fault or the movie's fault, but it's because Jacob Elordi is really good and the character is asking for your sympathy, and I think earns it.
So I want to take us to rhetorical situation real quick, because I think we have an opportunity to talk about...
Jen, you can't sidestep the is Elordi too hot for this role question. You're the only one qualified to answer it, both as a Gothic scholar and an Elordi ab scholar.
What are you talking about, Greg? I mean, I think it works. I think the fact that the scenes between him and Mia Goth's character are so brief, and yet I was convinced. Actually, so here's my hot take. Actually,
your hotness take. Got
it. Yes. Yeah. I think because I put in our question in our outline, which two characters have the most chemistry, or which two actors, I guess, maybe have the most chemistry with each other. And I think it is Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi. Because there's just like a pure magnetism when they're on screen together that is like both like this like love-hate relationship that I think really works. And in particular, the scene where Frankenstein has gone to bed after trying and thinking he has failed to create the creature, and the creature shows up in his bedroom, and they're like like there's just like a weird intimacy in that scene that I feel like has to be something. I was like, where's the version of the movie that's more of this? And so that's my take. So maybe that answers your question in a circuitous way. I think it works.
Maybe awkward for a father-son story, but you're not wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were talking about Crimson Peak earlier, like that.
That's true.
And Mia Goth plays. I don't think we mentioned Mia Goth plays Frankenstein's mother also, right? So it's intentional. It's part of the text. Is this weird like Oedipal Electra
and
complex
in the original Mary Shelley version to continue to be that guy. Elizabeth, who, because William the brother is a child still, Elizabeth is always just with Victor. She is his first cousin / adopted sister, who they've grown up since they were like 5 together, and then they get married, and then she's immediately murdered by the creature, as one does.
But Jen, could you take us to the rhetorical situation?
Thanks, Greg. I will. So all 4 of our regular co-hosts are writing professors, which means we like to have this section of the episode dedicated to making connections to our experience as scholars and teachers. In the teaching of writing, the rhetorical situation refers to any contextual factors that influence composing and interpretation. So we actually have one of each of these. I think I want to talk about the idea of canon and Guillermo del Toro like reacting against canon, both in terms of literature and film, like previous adaptations of Frankenstein. And then the other contextual factor that kind of fits into the rhetorical situation is the Netflix factor of it all. And that hopefully will segue us into Oscar's watch. Sound good? Okay. So, let's take the first question. Greg, you get first crack because canon is in your branding, your eye on canon.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think it's, to me, what I am inspired with this question to think about is like, the why of it all. And I haven't listened to that Guillermo del Toro, but I understand, this kind of fixation on he's always loved this book and so wanted to do his version of it. And that is a really fascinating kind of counterpoint to canon. So canon essentially is supposed to be like the agreed upon, these are the master works, these are the things everybody has to read, and they have that. And what's really fascinating for those of you who exist outside the field of literature is that this is basically always well, to steal PT's earlier metaphor, it's a car you can't catch, because whenever the canon is established, everybody immediately calls it into question. If you're only speaking about it in terms of film, think of like the Sight and Sound list, where everybody's like, as soon as it comes out, they're like, this is trash. Like everybody, what? Portrait of a Lady on Fire, top 10? No way. Can't happen. So then we have to revise it and we come back to it and we return to it again. And when I think about canon in my understanding of literature, I love the moments that the canon gets broken. So that naturally pulls me into this, that the reason why, in my lifetime, it went from dead white men only to break that down, welcome everybody in, and then like, whoa, hey, maybe not everybody. There still has to be some taste in that. And like, you kind of mix around and all those values get swirled. I like the idea that maybe Guillermo would really like Antonio and I for like ignoring all the other Frankenstein movies and just going with his, but to the point where if you're doing a new adaptation, it can't just, to me, be iteratively different. You have to use it as a vessel for saying something new. We've talked through these themes of parenthood, of forgiveness. Those are not absent from the earlier versions, but we're saying something new. I know everybody on this call agrees that the best adaptation that really broke canon apart is Little Women, right? And I think that's a perfect example of how you take a text, you crack it open, you change it, and you find something new alive in there that you get to celebrate and bring forward. And I can't give this film credit with stretching Frankenstein that far, but I do think it found a way to kind of justify its own existence by doing something really different. How'd I do?
Yeah, I thought that was good. And all I want to add to that is, as being the person that's like, well, in the book, it does this. And in the other movies, it actually was this. Is that in saying all of that, I hope now, an hour and 20 minutes into the episode, people are still sticking around to hear me say, I think it's good that it is different. For everything Greg was saying, is like, why would you just make the same version again? And even if, and there is sort of this paper trail kind of Guillermo del Toro for 30 years saying, the thing I most want to do is I want to make a version of Frankenstein. I really want to do Frankenstein. And one of the things he was saying was, I want to make the version of Frankenstein that was supposed to be the thing that was made in the 90s after Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola. And there was all this money that came through Coppola's production company to do a Frankenstein. And they got Frank Darabont, who wrote The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, adapted both of those, adapted a screenplay that apparently Frank Darabont loved and Guillermo del Toro loved, and is not really what Kenneth Branagh made in that movie, but it is also a sort of like, it starts on the ship. It has all these steps along the way. It's very different from earlier Frankenstein movies, but similar to the book with some changes. And Guillermo del Toro's like, the changes were the mistake. It should be really close to what happens in the book, because I love the book, And I'm glad that by the time he made the movie, he saw that just doing the same story is probably going to be boring. That's what we could sit down and read the book. We could get an audio book. It's going to be fine. So I like the idea that he made these changes. We can question whether the changes worked for us. I think on the most part that it did, but I understand there's people may be let down by it, but I think, yes, in terms of dealing with this as a entrance into, obviously the very localized Frankenstein canon, it's important that it made some moves on its own and made some things differently to make this worth watching beyond the sort of scope and talent that's involved in it. That it also has some thematic tweaks to make it Guillermo's version, as opposed to just a filter for a story that's already happened.
When I told my kids that I was going to watch Frankenstein, my youngest said like, "Oh, the green guy with like a bolt in his neck," and he goes like this. you're going to watch a movie about that. And I was like, well, I hope not. So I I'm happy that like that this could be like the defining version of Frankenstein moving forward, right? Like this is the thing that like when people think of Frankenstein, if this can be like the um I mean, I would want it to be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I guess. Like I'd want them to read it, but like in terms of like a movie adaptation of it, I'm glad that it's not this cartoonish version for a lot of people. That it would be this. That it would be this, right? Um, because on top of what Greg is saying and PT is saying about like we want every adaptation and iteration to add something new and to say something about today. Um, Something becomes canonical because it endures for a reason, because there's a core within there that we feel um, deserves to be looked at again and again through different perspectives and different lenses. And I think that what I appreciate that about this movie is that it rediscovered for me what what mattered about Frankenstein. Like I had a general idea about like, oh yeah, the doctor is really the monster, while all this stuff that what the PT was saying earlier, that like, okay, I get that, like that thematic point. Um, but, you know, even though the experience of the movie was, like, different than what I was expecting, I still found it, like, valuable and interesting, and as a message, right, I think it's a worthy message. It's worthier than one would expect from, like, from our, like, movie monsters. Jen, what do you think? Oh, PT, sorry.
Sorry, I do want to do one little like brief plug for anyone listening, and that's all that includes Antonio and Greg, who I don't think will have watched these before. The original Universal Monsters movies, the first two, both directed by James Whale, Frankenstein, and then Bride of Frankenstein. Uh, they're not like they a lot of the things where I think both of you were talking about this. It's like, yeah, but then like the creature, like, but you actually feel for him. You feel for the creature. The creature is not like an inhuman killing machine in those movies. Boris Karloff does a really good job of being very sympathetic, and everyone's being like, oh my god, like what is this thing? And then like lunging at him and him being like, what? Like, yeah, get out of here. But why are you in my face? Why are you waving a torch at me? And those movies are tied in with, like, he has real kind of incel vibes with Elizabeth, where he's just like, this woman who happens to look just like my mom has shown up, and like, wow, like this one woman, the only woman I've talked to in like 10 years, maybe she loves me. That like there is this sort of like modern elements of that, this sort of like dark manosphere corner of the soul that is there in the character. And I kind of, part of me wonders if one of the things that maybe is pushing people away from Oscar Isaac's performance is that element coming through, not like too obviously, but abrasively enough that they're just like, I don't like him and I don't like what he's doing. But I think it's intentional. I think it's part of the character. So I agree with you that there's an AI element here.
Yeah, and let's not forget the full title of Shelley's novel is Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, right? And so I feel like it's right there. It's we were fine with it when it was Oppenheimer, but we don't like it when it's, I don't know why.
I was also just thinking about how, like, we've heard this now leveled at Oscar Isaac, that like you are miscast and should not be in this role. And that the other time we heard that this year was Pedro Pascal in Materialists in particular. And I don't know what it is. Is it something about our Latino heartthrobs that we only want them to stay in a specific lane or something? I just culturally, I find it interesting that I don't often hear those charges leveled at actors in particular. And yet we've had these calls twice this year. So I don't know.
He also was miscast in Fantastic Four, I heard from people.
Yeah.
So I do think there is some
not
sort
Ralph
of
Innocent, Pedro Pascal.
Right.
Yeah,
of course.
Ralph Innocent, perfect as giant space robot that eats planets. Yeah. That's his wheelhouse.
He's always the like obnoxious friend of Ricky Gervais in The Office to me. I don't know. Yeah. Like it's I love that he has this whole career and his voice has carried him correctly, and his performances. But it is funny when he shows up and I'm just like, It's Finchie leading this interrogation of Victor
I
Frankenstein.
think we need to record you saying that and then just drop it in every time we mention him.
Yeah. Victor.
So
That seems to
another
be assuming he's going to be a major part of a few releases. Like he's not Tom Cruise, guys. Like he's not going to pop up every month.
so another looming tech powerhouse, Netflix, is behind this movie. Which in the got the segue thumbs up from Greg. That feels so good. That's but and the the industry has a lot of anxiety about Netflix's role in the industry. Do you think that is having some kind of impact on either the reception of this movie or kind of like anything like what is Netflix? Are we blaming anything on Netflix, or is Netflix was Netflix the right studio to produce this movie?
I want to blame the worst line in this movie on Netflix. Famously, one of the things that Netflix has told creators, I don't know if they can tell Guillermo del Toro this, but what they've told people who make TV shows and movies for them is you need characters to explain what's happening verbally because people are not watching the screen most of the time. They're looking at their phones. They're doing chores. We don't expect people to watch our platform. We just assume they're kind of 3/4 listening. And the scene when the brother dies and he says, Victor, you've been the real monster all along. Like after we already had Elizabeth say only monsters play God, which is clearly an ADR line. She is walking away. Her head is not moving. That was added later. Okay, that's fine. They took the tagline from the poster and they let her say it. To add that in as well felt very much like we don't know if the good people of the Netflix audience are going to understand what we're saying here. So let's make sure we have a scene where a character looks Oscar Isaac in the eye and says, you're actually the problem. The doctor is the monster. And I think that's unfortunate because I think everybody who doesn't like this movie talks about that moment as the moment when they were like, I'm done. I'm throwing my hands up. I don't care anymore about this. And that's too bad because I think there's so much good stuff here.
Isn't it sort of partly Guillermo del Toro's own fault? Because the only reason that seems like a cliche is because he's made all his other movies. You know what I mean? Like he's shot himself in the foot. That was not helpful. Sorry.
I'll just jump in and say that when it comes to the question of Netflix, I think if you're a movie lover, you have to struggle with this question because I think what we have seen over time is these kind of two lanes. There's the pure Electric State gray man garbage track that they take really talented actors and talented people. They give them way too much money and they create something abysmally bad. And then there's this track where they clearly want to be prestige-y. I will always credit them with Roma. I love Roma so deeply. And nobody else is throwing that much money at Alfonso Cuarón to make a black and white film about that. And I interpret this Frankenstein as them saying, Guillermo staying with them because they backed his Pinocchio so strongly and let him do his creative work and then also backed the film, made the big Oscar push for it. That I feel like this almost feels like a loyalty to them. I'm going to stay there. And nobody else is passing out money like Netflix is right now. So it feels like wonderful. And I was just singing Greta Gerwig's praises. And she's getting handed a giant boat of money to go make Narnia movies for them. And yet at the same time, I do think PT's pointing out, and then the other track of Netflix epitomizes this like assumption that film should not be challenging, that film should be background noise, which, I'm as guilty of as anybody else, but I hate that in myself. So the one silver lining I see in all this is that Netflix seems more and more interested in theatrical runs. They've bought their theaters in New York and LA. That's all they have to do to be awards eligible. But we are seeing increasing numbers of cities that are getting like I was saying, like a run of a week or two of these films. I have been able to see House of Dynamite. I've been able to see Frankenstein. I have seen Glass Onion as a special thing, but my city is getting, or sorry, not Glass Onion, Wake Up Dead Man. We are getting Wake Up Dead Man in a theatrical run, and I think that's only going to keep increasing because they are seeing at least the PR value of having a theatrical run that people will talk to their friends about, even if it doesn't make them as much money as keeping people on their platform.
The Ankler was talking about how Netflix's strategy going forward seems to be, and maybe I heard this on The Town also, like I think a couple places have talked about it, that it seems like post the K-pop Demon Hunter sing along, it seems like Netflix is okay with theaters, but in reverse order, where they will wait to see what is a hit and then send it to theaters, as opposed to the other way, assuming that there's a theatrical release and then gambling on whether or not it hits. And so I feel like maybe there's a future where if this gets enough Oscar nominations, which could be another segue into our last segment, could they have a special run in theaters, maybe on IMAX? I would love that. To kind of like a one weekend or 2 weekend run or something like that.
I mean, they do have IMAX prints because they were showing in IMAX in some places. So you have to expand that out. I think would make sense. And I threw this in the chat, but I will just say it again. The visual problems people have with this, which again is sort of, I think some people are just chalking it up as there's too much CGI. I didn't think there'd be so much CGI in this. But when you watch that little behind the scenes thing, which is on Netflix, you can see like the angel that appears in Victor's dream is a real person in a costume that they filmed. And then I think they added maybe some effects to it. But everything that it feels like people were complaining about as looking bad. Like I saw someone go off on a little rant about like, I can't believe they like CGI'd the tower and didn't just make a miniature. And then you can go and see the
That's
miniature.
what they did.
made it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that part of it is this sort of the way the stuff was shot and then the way it was sort of in post, between the color grading of it, between the way it was tweaked with, that like some of that seems to potentially be tied to the Netflix house style or what they want on their service. Like they want this sort of unified look across things. Like, I don't know if that's true, but there is sort of this discussion that people have that there is a Netflixification of a visual element. And when there is, like Cuarón didn't have that, didn't really deal with that in Roma. The CGI issues in Scorsese's Irishman did not seem Netflix related. That was just pushing de-aging technology and performances. But this one does feel like maybe some of the problems people have with the way it looks, which again, it's in many ways it's beautiful, but in some ways it's just kind of like, it has that same issue as Wicked. And like that was production design versus cinematography versus the lighting, external to just cinematography, became this big discussion around Wicked last year. And I feel like it could similarly happen here, where, no disrespect to John Chu, but Guillermo del Toro has a much bigger track record of visual brilliance in his filmmaking, that it feels odd. And it also feels a little bit like, is this because of the service that's supporting it?
Do you think this would have been better as 2 movies, Dune style, released in theaters and a year apart or 2 years apart?
No. Because it could not add more. And with love for the old Universal movies, you can't release 2 70-minute movies or 75-minute movies.
Do you think it would have been better on Netflix as a limited series instead of 1 movie?
No.
So it could sweep the Emmys?
Right.
So
well, because I mentioned at the top of the show, like Guillermo del Toro used the word episode instead of act, which I thought was very interesting. He said, the first episode, which he meant the opening frame narrative on the ship. And he said, the second episode is Victor's story. The third episode, like, so he sees this as 4 episodes as opposed to a 3, I guess maybe because it's not a clean 3-act structure, but does that mean anything? Or is he just using that word without?
English is not his first language.
Well, that
is what I will say.
Come on.
I think he's done TV. So if he wanted to do TV, he would have done TV.
He would have done it.
Right?
Okay.
Like he was somewhat creatively responsible for the adaptation of his novel, right? The Strain. Do you remember the vampire show? He was deeply involved in that. So I think he could have done it. PT makes interesting points about visuals, Jen. Do we have some kind of segment where we could talk about if this would possibly win an award for visual effects and or any other categories?
Do we? All right, so to catch listeners up real quick, This film, in terms of its reception, has been on a wild ride because it premiered at the Venice Film Festival in competition and was pretty, like, people were like, oh, it's not good. If you go back and listen to PT and I recorded a relatively shorter episode about the fall film festivals, like as an update to be like, oh, what's the buzz? What's going on? And if you listen to that, might remember me panicking because I was like, my hype draft is in shambles. I really wanted this movie to be good and it's not good. And so I'm really happy that that's evened out a bit and we all like the movie mostly. But apparently when it went to TIFF, or the Toronto International Film Festival, it placed, I believe, second in the audience award rankings, and from there it seems to have just been building momentum in terms of people liking it more and more. So do we think that momentum continues and it turns into a real contender? Is this more like Shape of Water or more like Nightmare Alley or what?
I would say I think it's somewhere in between, where I think, like, my memory of, and I might have been the least plugged in of the four of us, but my memory was Nightmare Alley was a Oscar announcement nomination morning surprise of like, oh, like Nightmare Alley made it in. Like that was, you like on the outside of almost everyone's list. But I don't think this will end up on the outside. I think it's going to be in the sort of Best Picture 10, sort of firmly positioned in there. I think it's going to have a bunch of below the line nominations. And I mean, there is momentum in supporting actor for Jacob Elordi. So I think it will get that. I don't know if it will, partially because he had The Shape of Water. Like if Guillermo del Toro had been nominated for The Shape of Water, didn't win, and maybe even if he had won for Pinocchio, which he did, and he has an Oscar for that, and he has an Oscar for director. I think with those two Oscars in his hands, that this is going to be like, great job, man. Like we might be looking, you might get a costume win or, some of the production design wins, but I don't think it's going to be a strong contender for winning, only because he's already won. And the narrative of a lot of the other sort of big prominent ones are, these people are overdue, or we could give it to them.
Right.
And if we're going to give a director like a second bite of the apple, like maybe it's going to be Chloe Zhao before Guillermo del Toro, who again did win for a second movie, but just in animated. So it's like, does he need a third movie to have won major Oscars? I don't know. So I think it's in the middle between the two that you mentioned.
Which one do you think is most likely to win? Is it makeup and hair?
Which category?
Yeah. Makeup and hair, costume. That's probably where I go. Production design.
Yeah.
Production design. I was going to say
production design. I think it would be interesting to see, does your lead acting award and makeup and hair, does that shift to supporting actor when it's still in some ways the titular character?
Very crowded already.
It is, but like even if Jacob Elordi doesn't win, could it be, well, but we're, if we got to give supporting actor to Stellan Skarsgård or Benicio del Toro or whoever they may go give it to, we'll give it makeup and hair. In many ways, that's also rewarding Elordi's performance.
It's interesting because with Nightmare Alley, from what I remember, the explanation was because people didn't really see that coming in Best Picture. And it was so many of the below the line guilds had so much strong support that that is what arguably pushed it into the Best Picture 10. And it didn't get any other, I believe, above the line. I could be wrong about that. Because like Bradley Cooper didn't get nominated.
No, it was nominated for picture, cinematography, costume design, and production design.
And that's it?
And Nightmare Alley, yeah.
All right. So yeah, I feel like that's the floor for this movie, probably. In some ways, right?
I can see that. I think maybe it should be noted, though, it's very weird that in saying like, okay, like there's 7 movies that are pretty locked in. It's like 2 of them are international movies. 1 of them is a vampire movie. 1 of them is like not like a Frankenstein movie, but not like a movie like Frankenstein, like Poor Things. It's a Frankenstein movie. So, it's a creature movie from Guillermo del Toro, and then an action movie from Paul Thomas Anderson. Like that's, and then there's one like Shakespeare era movie with people being sad about sad things, which is great, and I'm excited to see that. But like that feels like, of course, that gets nominated for Best Picture. Well, that's the Academy for you. But then it's all these genre things, and that doesn't include Avatar or Wicked, which could still make it. Both could make it in. So there could be this very odd, like the shifts we've been seeing about what counts as an Academy movie might really all come together to have like more than half of the nominees for Best Picture be movies that 5 years ago you would be like, well, that would never make it in.
But I feel like there's an equivalent of that every year now, where we say, well, the Academy's not going to go for that, and then they do.
But now it's only going for that. Like it's just going to be all those movies.
Right. That does feel weird. And I think, and the other thing that I keep hearing is like people saying, well, don't accidentally put more than one Netflix movie in the Best Picture 10, because that seems unlikely.
So,
right?
Yeah, I think the two-pronged path, or the two-step process that leads to this movie not getting a Best Picture nomination is people really love Jay Kelly when it comes out, and that becomes the Netflix movie it's pushing. Potentially Wake Up Dead Man. I don't know if they're going to be able to push that one to Best Picture, despite me really liking it.
Well, Greg has thoughts about that our listeners soon will be able to hear.
Exciting.
On his soon-to-be-released solo pad.
But I think
when we're talking now, right?
Oh, that's true.
That's true.
Never mind.
In a formerly released, yes. Before you go back to listen to the 2018 Oscar Ferry flashback to hear about Shape of Water, listen to Greg talk about Wake Up Dead Man and other movies. But basically, if another movie becomes the Netflix primary push, and also if because of that, there starts to be a like, all right, maybe it's enough with the genre stuff. Like, we need to have a movie about real people doing real people stuff. More movies about real people doing real people stuff.
My worry is that people are being too presumptuous about Sinners. It seems so obvious to all of us, but then on nomination morning, everyone's going to be like, what? What happened? Where did all those nominations go?
Are you saying that on Oscar nomination morning, the Academy might surprise us by forgetting about the movie with black people in it? No, not this Academy. Not this Academy. The genre movie will get.
Like today, I heard somebody being like, "Oh yeah, Delroy Lindo could definitely get in for supporting actor," and I was like, "That's not happening. We didn't get him in for Da 5 Bloods, and I don't think anyone is angry enough about that for it to matter."
I'm angry enough about it.
I know I am too, but I'm just saying, like, we're not Academy voters,
I don't know.
right?
That's true.
But yeah, it's already the supporting actor is already packed in terms of. We could get double nom for One Battle After Another with Sean Penn and then Benicio
del Toro.
And then there's Paul Mescal's running and supporting for Hamnet.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems like an easy Stellan Skarsgård. So that's already Does that leave one spot? And that's that's 5 already, right? Yeah.
Adam Sandler. Wait, I already got lost.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it's 4. Yeah, Adam Sandler. Potentially 2 people from Sinners, not according to Jen, neither of them will get in, but Miles Caton and Delroy Lindo.
And that's not even factoring in like I can't think of it now who it is, but there's a bunch of other people that could be in this category also that would be kind of the same ranking of Jacob Elordi right now. Now I want to go look it up. So, sorry, Antonio. We're almost
Josh O'Connor for Wake Up Dead Man?
No, that's not what I was thinking of.
Jonathan Bailey for Wicked?
That's possible if Wicked hits big enough.
I mean, part of the issue also is that, if traditional Oscar movies disappoint, like I mean, I liked House of Dynamite. You 3 didn't, and generally it seems like that has sort of that the odds for that have winnowed down. Like Rental Family looks absolutely awful, but also looks like the kind of classic Oscar baity thing. But I'm going to assume that that's bad, and no one's going to get nominated for that. So, like, if those things fail, and like I think there have been a lot of things. We've had a string, I think, of movies that we've had sort of mixed reviews or some negative reviews that have reminded us how good we've had it this year and how lucky we were to have had a Sinners and a One Battle After Another. So, despite me really loving One Battle After Another and it surpassing Sinners, I still have hope that people still remember that. It's just like an incredible time and a really special film that endured. And it wasn't a summer movie, right? It came out
April.
May or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
and but endured through the summer. It just felt so big. But
I think it
not
was
just
earlier
big,
than that.
but
It might have been March.
yeah. Oh yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Like it was like after the Oscar. It was the first movie we reviewed after the Oscars, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
Right? Am I
that
just not
sounds right.
remembering
Well,
that?
it definitely wasn't eligible for our hype draft because it had already come out and we
Yeah.
had seen it. We did that a
Though,
few weeks after.
I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic. It feels, if I'm saying where I'm sitting on who knows when we record, but maybe November 10th, it's starting to feel like Dune 2 to me. Like we're gonna take it for granted, and it's not fair, but it's gonna get a little forgotten in the mix. As a point of evidence, I would say it just came back to theaters on Halloween, and I heard zero people talking about that, right? I think it got like a week, or it got at least 2 or 3 nights, and I didn't see a big bump anywhere. So makes me nervous for Sinners, because I really love that movie too, but we'll see.
I do think part of Sinner's arc will be dependent on the reaction to Wicked for Good and Avatar Fire and Ash. Because if those are like, they hit the way the last installments of both of those did, then they make a ton of money. Then it could be like, okay, we got to get both of these in. These are the blockbusters. Wait a minute. Like, do we need a third blockbuster? And I'd like to think there's enough other stuff happening with Sinners and around Sinners and the meaning and message, all due respect to the meaning and messages of the Wicked movies and the Avatar movies. But there's a little more depth, I think, in Sinners. And, I think that hopefully that would carry forward the perpetual problem that folks have been bringing up all along with Sinners, beyond, as Greg mentioned, the traditional marginalization of Black stories and Black voices in the Academy, is also that internationally people are like, I don't know what this is talking about, and I don't really care because it's about vampires, and I guess it's about some other stuff, but you Americans have a bunch of weirdness that I don't really want to dig into. So good luck with all of that. Maybe I'll go watch the Na'vi another time instead. So, if instead Avatar is the Dune 2, then maybe Sinners has a real chance to get the level of nominations we've been expecting. But I think it's fair to be worried about that.
Jen, do you think the international contingent in the Academy helps or hurts Frankenstein? Is this European enough for the Europeans?
I would say yes. Maybe not as much because of the cast, but I think Guillermo is very well loved across Europe, and Europe is the biggest voting body internationally, I would say. So, but oh wait, yes, I forgot. I just learned, this is hot Oscar pundit news. We are not going to have the BAFTA nominations prior to the Oscar nominations this year.
Whoa.
Isn't that wild? Like,
That is strange.
and that, because that's usually that's how we knew Poor Things was going to clean up, right? Like, over Barbie, like, you know what I mean? Like that usually is the more European international favorites are in those nominations.
Say it again. So the nominations for the BAFTAs will not come out before the nominations to the Oscars.
Correct.
Do you mean before the nomination period or before the nomination announcement?
That I don't know, but
the ceremonies will still happen in the order. We will still have the BAFTA awards before the Oscars.
I assume
it won't be like the WGA awards happening 2 months after the Oscars, like a year or two ago. It was like, okay, whatever. We're done. We're done with.
Now I need to fact check this. But I heard this today on Awards Watch, and they were saying this is going to throw my nomination predictions into total chaos. Because usually it's a pretty good course correction of like, oh, okay, this is how BAFTA's feeling. So that sort of represents the European voting.
It's also interesting. It's also interesting that there are 3 movies that are in the maybe top 15 or top maybe 17 or 18 that are international movies. And we've gone from there being, we can expect 1 to, we've had 2 with Anatomy of a Fallen, Zone of Interest. But could we get to 3 and there's sentimental value as a European movie? It was just an accident as a more kind of, Middle Eastern movie. And then no other choice as an East Asian movie. Like, could all 3 of those make it? I think the BAFTAs would be an interesting bellwether of that, which we may not have because of this new news, or at least this new realization. Jen, updates?
I found a Reddit forum that backs up what I'm saying. But the ceremony, it says, for BAFTA is still February 22nd. So yes. So it sounds like
Normal.
it's only the nominations that we'll get later after because the Oscars usually come up with their nominations the first week of January, right?
Yes, I'm looking at the Oscars shortlist. Nomination voting begins January 12th, Monday, January 12th, and ends Friday, January 16th. I don't know, how does that coincide with so that's before the nominations. The nominations are announced January 22nd, which is not going to be 5 days before the BAFTAs. But the voting for the Oscars after the nominees come out is February 26th through March 5th. So basically the voting for the nominations for the Oscars will be before the BAFTAs, but then everything about the BAFTAs will take place between nomination voting and award voting for the Oscars. So it can still influence the final votes,
right?
The final awards, but it won't influence the nominations.
Nominations, yes. That sounds right. Crazy.
Wild.
Suddenly the Gotham Awards will become more important. I don't know what that means. What kind of
letters? The letters will be
letters.
It's time.
Yeah. I guess actually the Golden Globes probably is what rises more notoriety at that point because it's around the ceremony for the Golden Globes is around right before that time.
I will say in terms of European votes, to Greg's question, I think if the whole campaign picks up that Oscar Isaac sort of elevator pitch of this as the Latin American Catholic version of a traditional European story or a classical European story, then that could be really interesting. Like that could be something where I wonder if that builds a bridge, even if they're like, this isn't my Frankenstein, but it makes it interesting in a way that could resonate with audiences in that continent.
Yep. We'll have to wait and see. So this has been great. We're now hitting the 2-hour mark. So I think we need to stop.
This is for Sarah.
We're still shorter than the movie. So that's all right.
Getting close.
Yeah, we're getting close though. Antonio, where can folks find you? And I know there's only one place.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Alefano, Aelefano. Greg, where can they find you?
They can find me on Letterboxd and somewhat on Instagram at IonCanon, EYEONCANON. PT, where can people find you and maybe the show if you can spare a moment?
Well, they can find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. In terms of the show, you can also find the show there at LTR Pod. You can look for us on Instagram Threads and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com, or you can just follow us wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, follow, add, whatever the mechanism is where you are listening right now. Add us and you'll get new episodes, such as the quick takes that Greg shared about some of the movies he saw, as well as upcoming episodes like Begonia and other movies that we have not decided yet. Jen, where can folks find you?
That was unnecessarily ominous. You can find me. You can find me on Instagram.
With Wicked and Avatar on the horizon, things get ominous.
Let's not forget Zootopia 2. The only trailer that convinced my kids they want to go to the movies. Zootopia 2. The hamsters dancing nonsensically in Zootopia 2. You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Subchakchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jinn. Who can do their best? Victor.
Antonio's voice was better at the beginning.
Yeah.
Fire bad.
I really want the outtakes of a montage of Jacob Elordi just practicing Victor.
We never shouted out Young Frankenstein, but I would like to do that if people have not seen that. Even if you've never watched the originals, Universal ones, Young Frankenstein is one of the best adaptations of the story.